Hey everyone, and welcome back to Menace and the Monk. It's a very special video today because we're joined by Neil Atkinson from the Anfield Rap. Neil, thank you so much for your time. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Very pleased to be here.
We're just so delighted that you're here, Neil. But more importantly, before we get into the meat of the conversation, it's a very important question I have to ask you. The Anfield Rap. When are you guys coming to India?
So we've talked about it. We
Oh,
have talked about it. Not necessarily to do a live show, but to maybe go and watch the game with a couple of supporters clubs at some point or
Wow,
something like that. So it has been discussed.
wow.
At the minute, we haven't got anything genuinely nailed on. But when I say when because I think it will happen at some point in the next couple of years. So when we do have that, we will definitely give you a shout and let you know. I would just sort of point out though that India is like a real I'm no expert on Indian geography, but I do know it is a very big place. So
Yep.
to be crystal clear about this, there's a number of people who are currently in Dublin who are annoyed we're going to Belfast and not going to Dublin, which is perfectly reasonable. It's very nice of them. That's flattering, if anything. So with the idea that we go to India, let's be crystal clear, we'll be going to like one or two places. There's a lot of India we won't be going to. So we need
oh
to
yeah.
manage expectations on that score.
Absolutely, because Coldplay is visiting India, by the way, Neil, and they're performing in Mumbai, and the rest of the country is pissed that they're not performing in their city. So we can totally relate to what you're saying.
And we're just about as big as Coldplay, so just imagine the ramifications there would be.
Absolutely,
We have as big a
I
light
buy
show.
that.
if you if you were to please every club in India, you'd be in India for at least a month and attending a game, you know,
Yeah,
every week.
absolutely. So absolutely. So that is the difficult part. It's always the difficult part, and also we have to do everything we do back here as well. So it's working that balance out. But genuinely, we have talked about it, and it is something that we are gonna see if we can do at some point soon. And we'd really enjoy it. It really would be fantastic.
The tweet is gonna
Absolutely.
come out, Nidhi. The Anfield rap to India. Here we go. Very soon. I think.
Here
I
we
think
go. Confirmed.
Nidhi.
All right. So before we get into the video, just to give everybody a little bit of a context about what about this entire conversation really. So Neil's written a book called Transformer. It's obviously about Jurgen Klopp. The book is out, and we will ask Neil about his experiences about writing the book and everything that went along, and a little bit about Liverpool and a little bit about Arneslot and everything. So, Neil, my first question to you is, what made you write this book? Because I know the book begins with the question why, and just for our viewers, what made you want to write this book?
Well, he said he was packing in. Is genuinely one of the things that made me think, well, it would be good to do something around all of this. There obviously wasn't time to get it ready for when for that week because
Yeah,
it was a big undertaking, but there was I think a couple of times through the era I've been writing about Liverpool pretty consistently since 2014 and doing the Anfield Rap since 2011 on the whole. So having been pretty up close to it, there was a thing where I thought it would be good to get something down, but also not to just write about him, because whilst he's manager, a lot of other things happen, both sort of culturally around the world and in Britain, and also he himself. He's a really interesting person, but he's actually a really interesting person, I think, in terms of someone to see the world through, rather than just the idea of tell his story. I think he wanted to talk a lot about the world and the way in which he saw it and his own behaviours within that. And I wanted to get all of that down. And also I just sort of wanted to draw a line under the period. One of the best things about writing the book and doing the work I'm doing right now, talking about it, and in the context of Arne Slot, like you already said, is like I loved the period of time and had the most amazing amount of fun, like so many Liverpool supporters. But it's the idea that he himself was building on something, and the next guy now builds on what he's done. So not the idea we need to reminisce and be sort of soppy about it and be dewy-eyed and say things like it'll never be as good as that again, but instead say, he never wanted to say that. He wanted to sort of to take on from Liverpool's past and create a better present, and that's the best way to live. It's the best way to be, is to be able to live in the present and be part of the moment. So there's a bit of me that now that I've finished it, especially, I like the idea of drawing a line under the period saying it was incredible. We should always remember it. We should always treasure it, but we shouldn't be as nostalgic about it. We shouldn't allow it to, we should see it in its entirety, and we should, as I say, respect and love and adore it and everything that came
Right.
from it. But we should use it to get ready for the next thing, and then the thing after that, and the thing after that. We should always be in the moment, because that's the best way to be, and that's the way he wanted to be as well, and that comes through again and again in the book.
Neil, I mean, it's the fact that you mentioned that, and we were going through the index of the book. Of course, you've got so many games, so many periods that you've covered over there. The Wolves game, the last game, of course. When I was watching that, of course, there were compilations of his last game at Mainz, at Borussia Dortmund. I always thought he's going to cry as well. I was weeping the last 10 odd minutes, but it turned into a celebration at the end of it. And that is the man that Jurgen Klopp is. Like you said, what he does, just not with the football club, how he conducted himself during COVID. Like he always said that football is not the most important thing, but when it comes to the least important things, it is the most important thing.
Yeah.
We spoke about Brexit as well. So it just felt like a match made in heaven, right? Like, just not the manager of a football club, just a guardian of the city in a way, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a big part of that, and he becomes that. It's
Yeah.
important to say he doesn't turn up just as that person. And I think he wanted to be a different person than he was in Dortmund. And I think maybe when he was in Dortmund, because it was a bigger club than Mainz, he wanted to be a different person than he was in Mainz. I think, I use the word transformer in the title about things he transforms. But things, first and foremost, have got to want to be transformed. And also he himself, I think, does sort of transform himself. He begins to talk more about social and political matters, in part forced on him by the pandemic, don't get me wrong. The timing of it, it is a pandemic after all, you can't plan for it. But he begins to
Yeah.
talk more about it in 2018, when by that point he's been Liverpool manager for almost 2.5 years. He's on the run towards his first Champions League final as Liverpool manager. And that's when he begins to sort of speak more and more freely and is asked more questions about matters wider than football. And people want to get to know who he is that bit more. And he shares himself in a really honest way with people. And that grows and grows. My point is, and it's a really important point for the now, is Jurgen Klopp wouldn't have got to be Jurgen Klopp if he'd have been bouncing around just being 11th as Liverpool manager. Winning helps, and winning's such an important part of this. We can't overlook that. And I think that you can't sort of tritely say he's a great person, which he is, but you can't sort of tritely say he's a great person and it would have happened no matter what. You've got to firstly remember he's a brilliant football manager. But even in those days, we act now as though so much of what Klopp achieved is just downright inevitable. But you go through it in a, with a bit of distance, as I did in the clear light of day. Loads of things that now just get acted as though they were inevitably going to happen were not inevitable. To qualify for the Champions League in 2017. It's a pretty terrible game at Watford, and they need an Emre Can overhead kick. Part of why we love the Alisson Becker header against West Brom is because, and the only reason he's up there to do it was because they thought they needed that header to qualify for the Champions League, and the next season they get to the Champions League final, and all the stuff that happens along the way, and the way the club feels because it got back into the Champions League and made sure it happened. All of these things, there's a lot of knife-edge moments that now we act as though, well, yeah, but part of Jurgen's genius is knife-edge moments, and it sort of is, but they could go the other way on a few occasions. And then he could have been under more pressure that he doesn't win in 16, 17. He doesn't win a game for 4 to 6 weeks. And then we beat Tottenham 2-0 with 2 brilliant Sadio Mane goals. But if Tottenham turn up that day, Tottenham at that point were a slightly better side than us. If Tottenham turn up that day and play ever so well, we could be saying he didn't win for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, and then he might be under real pressure as a manager.
Yeah.
And then the way everyone looks at the summer before, when he sold a lot of players in the summer of 16, people would have been saying we need those players now. Lovren gets substituted against Tottenham in 2017 when he's terrible for half an hour. Liverpool then are 17 games unbeaten after that, and Lovren plays his part in a lot of those games. But at that moment, we were all saying it's madness this manager didn't buy a centre-back in the summer, because he tried to buy Van Dijk and he wanted to wait for Van Dijk, and he gets Van Dijk. But if he doesn't if he doesn't go that many games unbeaten, he could have been under real pressure. The season might have gone the other way. Van Dijk might have said, I don't want to go. You know what I mean? All of this is, we act now like the whole story and the nature of Jurgen and the person, it was always all going to work. And, I think that it did all work absolutely brilliantly. But we've almost got to respect the sport and process and his brilliance in a way, of ensuring that even when it went right up to the knife edge, even when it looked like he might fall off the tightrope, he pulled it back. But also respect that, no matter how wonderful a person he was, if he hadn't have pulled it back, a lot of the wonderful things or the way we perceive him, we might not perceive him that way. He might be another fellow who turns up to Liverpool, nearly managed it, but couldn't quite do it. And I think it's really important to sort of to have the whole package when you think about Klopp and when you think about the 9 years.
Um, very, very quickly, Neil. I mean, Jurgen Klopp's impact went beyond just football. I mean, the city of Liverpool loved him. So, I mean, I think he was given the keys to the city, or he was awarded by the city. So, I mean, we've been fortunate enough to visit Anfield a few number of times, and we do see his impact around the city. But for you guys who've been brought up in that city, can you talk to us a little bit about the impact of Jurgen Klopp on the city and not the football?
Yeah, again, it comes through the football, but it's things like, the idea that people come, as you've described, love the place, come back, come with relatives, make a weekend of it, or come with friends, make a series of nights out of it. I think the impact on the city is wider than just the football, but it stems first and foremost from that. And that's what, I think that now there's a general wide range and acceptance within Liverpool that Liverpool is a global footballing city. It's not parochial about it. It likes to see people. It likes people to come and be part of it. I think that is, a battle that now every now and again it flares up, but I think it's mostly just being won. I think the city wants to be inclusive of that and understands that in a way. Football's almost like an export industry in the city of Liverpool now. We're global leaders in the thing. And Jurgen Klopp, we were global leaders. We stopped being for a while, and Jurgen Klopp emphatically got us back to being global leaders. And then within that, I think that, the force of his personality as a massive part of that, in terms of wanting people to be that best version of themselves, to support each other and go through those processes. I always use the example of there's all the hotels that have opened around Anfield. I think a big part of them is Jurgen. Now, Jurgen didn't open any of the hotels. He's probably never been to any of them, but they probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. The fan park in Kyiv in 2018. Jurgen,
we were there. We
were
there.
So you'll know what it was like, and it was like a meeting of all of it was like everyone in Liverpool who supports Liverpool sent delegates from around the globe. We all got together, and we all decided that we were just going to enjoy this, more than anything else, and that was the main job, and that's something we had to do. And there's a book that Dan Morgan's written about Jurgen Klopp, and Sean O'Donnell, who was part of Boss and does stuff with us from time to time. He talks about this brilliantly and what Kyiv meant in that moment. But Jurgen wasn't there, and Jurgen won't even have known anything about it until afterwards. He won't have known what went on. He'll have thought the supporters will have a nice time, but he won't have known. But what he did was he created the circumstances and the weather and the attitude and the inclusivity from the club, from the city. He created the circumstances where all that was possible, and he led the way. And then from there, he gave people the room to be the best versions of themselves, and they became the best versions of themselves.
Correct.
And that rubs off on each other. And to me, that's the greatest gift of having had Jurgen Klopp as a manager. And I think it's a gift that Mainz had, a gift that Dortmund had, and a gift that Liverpool emphatically had.
Absolutely.
And everything that Jurgen Klopp has done will be remembered forever. You mentioned Kiev, Neil. I remember, I mean, we were like low after we lost the game, and we reached back in India, and we saw a video of Jurgen Klopp singing and dancing with a few supporters. That I mean, he just had the knack of just making us happy irrespective of whatever happens. That personality is so rare. Neil, I mean, the title of your book is Transformer. When Jurgen Klopp was our manager, Mentality Monster was something which was very well associated with us. You started your book from West Brom as well, of course, in front of the Kop, and the way we celebrated. And it ends at Wolves, where we won as well, the last game. But which is that game for you where we transformed into Mentality Monsters?
Well, I think when we transform into... So it's not my favourite game of the period, although I loved it. But the game where I think we announced to the world what we're going to be is the 4-3 against City at Anfield, when they go 4-1 up in the January of 2018. I think that sets everything up. It's a funny game. When I was researching the book, I say researching, I was just looking on LFC history. Let's not get carried away. I wasn't sort of in libraries and burning candles and things. But when I looked into the way that season went, what's forgotten is that City were obviously on this brilliant run, and Guardiola was bedded in. It was his second season, and City, when they come to Anfield, they've won 20 and drawn 2 of the league games. They've won 5 Champions League group games. They lost the 6th one, but it was the 6th game against, I think it was Leipzig, because they always play Leipzig somehow. And
Yeah.
it was a weakened team, so they were on 15 points for that game. I.e., this was an unbelievable side. But when I looked into it, we were 17 unbeaten. We were 17 unbeaten that game against City. So in our heads, still now when we look back on it, we're the underdogs. And as far as the nation was concerned, we were the underdogs. But this team hadn't lost a game in 17. So it was, it wasn't as though it was a gang of jumped up kids or anything like that. This was a serious team at that point in time. But all of that said, what they do to City when they absolutely blow them to smithereens in the second half period, when the crowd is just absolute bedlam, you can barely hear yourself think in the ground. And it was that idea, I think, of the crowd and the team coming together in a way that was simultaneously obviously organic, but it almost felt like it was part of the team talk. Like, this is what we're going to have to do today all together if we're going to get a result here, and that idea of, you've got to make this run and you've got to make that run. And then a few 50,000 people could all scream like lunatics. It almost felt like it was that embedded in the setup that day. And then a few weeks later, you got the footage of Guardiola in the All or Nothing documentary, sat in a dressing room in Goodison before his team's playing Everton, saying, what am I going to do about Liverpool? What am I going to do about Mane, Salah, and Firmino? And that was before we were playing them then in Europe, and that grows into that. And I think that's the game where Liverpool move from the idea of maybe a Liverpool team that's having a bit of a good season, which a couple of times in this period you can say of Manchester United, into the idea of a Liverpool team that can take on anyone and can beat anyone and can finish ahead of anyone, and a Liverpool team you need to be scared to death of is, I think, that 4-3.
But I mean, we were looking at the chapters, right? The 4-3 against Manchester City, of course, is a key game. But there's no mention of Barcelona, Neil.
Yeah.
At least.
Why not? That is one of the best games that we have seen. At least in my lifetime, the Barcelona 4-0 is probably the best Liverpool game ever.
I wasn't there.
Is there a reason why you haven't pointed out that fixture?
I wasn't there.
Wow.
I was in A&E. I was in Liverpool. I had a ticket and I didn't go to the game. I was in A&E at that point. I sort of detail it in the book. You can't be at every game. So it would have felt dishonest to have put Barcelona in, because you've got to talk about the crowds and you've got to talk about the noise.
Wow.
And I wasn't there. Like, I watched Barcelona, and I use watched very loosely. That in the A&E that I was in, they had like iPads that were set to child settings for kids to play with to distract them when they're in accident and emergency. And I had to like almost hack into the iPad to get it even just to show me the Liverpool Echo Live blog of the game. So not only was I not at Anfield, I didn't need. So there's some games in there that I've watched on television and I detail why. There's the Manchester City FA Cup semi-final. I talk about that I wasn't there, but why it was special to me because I watched it on television and where I was and how I saw it. There's nothing for me that I can write about that's sort of special about the night against Barcelona, other than I got out of A&E. I was given the all clear at 1 a.m. I got a taxi home, and at 2 a.m. I found an overseas channel that was replaying the game in full. And I sat and I watched the game in full, but knowing the scoreline, knowing the outcome. So I watched from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. that night. I watched it all back, saw it all. But ultimately, no, I was not at Anfield. And as I say, because it was such an Anfield experience, it felt a little bit dishonest. But obviously, I'd much rather they won the game than they didn't. We can't always be at the match. I think it's a really important thing. I think that everyone's very hooked. And certainly people who get to go to a lot of matches, they're very hooked on the idea that they have to be there. And I don't think that's the case. I think that the vast majority of Liverpool supporters do not go to the vast majority of football matches. And I think there's nothing wrong with that from time to time. As someone who's lucky enough to get to go a lot, I think it's all right. It's all right not to. I think the most important thing, and again, another reason why Barcelona wasn't special for me in the moment, obviously in hindsight it is, but was that I didn't have anyone to share it with. For me, the most important thing when you watch the game is that you've got people to share it with. So if you're in the ground, you've got people to share it with. If you go out to supporters clubs or go out to bars, wherever you are in the world, you've got people to share it with. Sharing it's the most important thing, I think, not where you are, but sharing it is really important. But because of all the circumstances, I couldn't even do that night. So if I'd have needed to go abroad and have watched it, I'd be talking about whatever. I'd have probably put it in and talked about what everyone else was doing in the bar. But as it was, I just couldn't sort of replicate the moment. So we kicked it around and it came up with the publisher. It's interesting you've not included it, and et cetera, et cetera. But I've written about why I wasn't there, and I've also written about the fact that you can't be at every match, and some of them you've got to roll with the punches.
Right. Neil, in your book, you've written about nostalgia and how it is almost a dangerous thing, and you've touched upon it. What do you mean by that, and how relevant is that in the context of us now having a new manager, and the comparisons with Jurgen Klopp and everything? But firstly, what do you mean by nostalgia being slightly? You've written nostalgia will kill you, and it almost did kill us.
Yeah, so I mean, what I mean by that is that I think that to use Liverpool as an example, but I think it goes much wider than that. To use Liverpool Football Club as an example, first and foremost, I think there's therefore this thing that happened around sort of 2010, where because of everything that had gone on with takeovers and things like that, everyone just sort of settled into a mode of, well, there was, there was the good old days, and there was this, and there was that, and maybe we'll do things. I've got this fictional person who, if they were 50 years old in 2010, born in Liverpool, they'll have been born in 1960, they'll have been 20 in 1980, and if you'd have said to that person in 2010, will it ever be as good again as it was when you were young? They'd have said, no, you'll never beat what we had. You'll never know anything like it. And if you said to that same person in 2024, how did you feel about it all? They'd have said, they were the best years of my life. The ones with Jurgen. They were the ones. It was absolutely incredible. But what's important, though, is that I would still say that person's potentially wrong. The best bit could still be to come. In 1980, you were still watching a Paisley side where some people thought it'd never be as good as it was under Shankly. What is really important is that you see what's gone before as something to build on, not something to either pay endless homage to, feel dwarfed by, or just end up being made inert by. And I think there's a lot of parts of Liverpool that has allowed themselves. There used to be constant arguments on podcasts such as mine about Liverpool, why Liverpool needed to return to the Liverpool way. Pundits used to say that, people used to write about it, and then from about 2017, no one ever did anymore. Like, no one ever says the Liverpool way anymore on punditry or podcasts or anything like that, because there was no need to, because there was what was happening. I'm not going to call it the Klopp way, because I almost don't think you give it a name. There was the idea of living in the moment and making the moment special and making it brilliant. People stopped to talk about that, and instead they would occasionally write pieces about the new things that Liverpool were doing, or they'd say this is where it's like the old values. But people stopped to fetishize this idea of it's got to be done in the Liverpool way. That disappeared completely. But for the previous 20 odd years, since 1990 on and off, there was a constant ongoing broiling argument about what the Liverpool way was and what we meant by it and what's part of that and who was in the Liverpool way tradition and who wasn't. And that was all constantly a discussion, and it was up for grabs, and people would row about it. I did shows about it in 2012 and 2013. I remember when Klopp took the players to the Kop against West Bromwich Albion, people said that's not the Liverpool way. You don't celebrate a 2-2 draw. That's not the Liverpool way. People said that back there, and by the time we get to 2017, it had gone. And that's what I mean by nostalgia. What I mean is the idea that the past was better, and endlessly better. And there'll obviously be years or seasons or moments in football, because it's a competition where, there will have been years where in the past things went better, but you can't be beholden to it or obsessed with it. And I think if you look across so many aspects of our lives, culturally, in terms of movies, constant reboots, sequels, reimaginings, we're becoming imprisoned by nostalgia. I think if you look at, for instance, even something else, and it's not all necessarily bad. A lot of my friends were excited by the idea of an Oasis tour in the UK, and they were trying to get tickets. But you're just trying to rekindle the past. Why don't you go and see some gigs of new bands who are around now? And I'm not saying my argument here isn't that people can't enjoy themselves or do what they want to do, but my point is that the more you wallow in what's been, the less you're likely to be able to create the next good thing, the less engaged you are. And then you look at our politics globally, so many different democracies, people harking back to the past. There's a massive example of it, obviously, that's literally put on, emblazoned on red baseball caps in America, because the key tenet of that is the word again. So the idea is we're harking back, and not dealing with the way the world is now. And the best way to progress in the way the world is now is to look at it clear-eyed and say, this is the way the world is now. You're not going to, you can't press a button and go back to 1955 or from a Liverpool point of view, 1982 in terms of the football. You're not going to get that. You've got to deal with how it is now. And the manager, from the minute he turns up, Klopp, he wanted to deal with how it was now and what we'll need to do now. And in fact, he didn't just work out what he needed to do now. He actually brilliantly, I think, worked out more than anyone else what Guardiola would do with all of the Manchester City backing. And he worked out that I need to get 100 points. He's lived it with Bayern Munich. So he didn't just work on what had been, or even the present. He managed to work out what he needs to do in 2 years' time. And if you see all of the decisions he makes between 2015 when he arrives, and 2017, 2018, all of the decisions are made in the context of we need to get 100 points. And if I can't get 100 points, I'm not buying a player. If that player is not going to add to my 100 points, there's a couple of exceptions. Klavan, Karius, maybe, who were just there to sort of move us along a little bit. But almost everything else is done through the lens of, I've got to be able to get 100 points because that's what they're going to do. And I want to beat them. And I think he saw that and no one else did. If you want to live a good life now and tomorrow, you've got to be clear-eyed about what now and tomorrow actually means. And I think that's the case in so many spheres. And that's what I mean by nostalgia will kill you.
And
absolutely,
that's so well said, Neil, because maybe because it's of the nostalgia, maybe it's because of the emotions, maybe it's because of what we've been through with Jurgen Klopp. There's a sense of many of us not totally accepting Slot yet as because there's no familiarity right now.
No,
because I mean it's tough to we have a joke on Menace and the Monk. That's our channel, which it feels like your parents have separated, your father is left, and now there's a stepdad who jumped into the family. So it's going to take some time to get used to everything now. Not that there's anything wrong with Arne Slot, but it kind of feels like that. It's going to take some time to win us over. But also there's a chapter in your book about Brighton where we lost 3-0. Do you think that was the final nail in the coffin? That is when he realized he ran out of energy?
No, but what I think is, because I think that, for instance, they do really well when they go back to Brighton the following season against De Zerbi. They've got a really clear plan.
Yeah.
The language I use in the book is, there's the phrase in English that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and there's a version of that in lots of languages. I think Klopp showed repeatedly he was more than able of learning new tricks. I think on the energy point, though, I think one of the things he realises is he almost doesn't want to. Like, I think it's more that. I think it's not the idea that he couldn't. I think it's the idea that he almost just didn't want to rouse everything it would take to do it all, to go through all that process again. So there's loads of times in 21-22 season when we're absolutely brilliant. And I think in loads of ways it might be the best football we play, certainly the best football we play against the poorer sides. We win 19 of the 20 games against the bottom 10. That season in 21-22. The only one we don't win is away at Brentford, a 3-3 draw. And we average 2.8 goals a game against that bottom 10, home and away. So effectively, the only way you could get a draw against that Liverpool team if you were in the bottom 10 was to score 3 goals. That's what you needed. That was your pie. You had to be able to score 3. And that day, Brentford managed it, and they were lucky to manage it. But they do manage it, and that's the only one we don't win. You know, that was a different team to the one he had in 2018. You know, that was massively different, moved on. And when people talk at the minute about the difference between Slot and Klopp's football, I think part of the reason why Slot keeps saying it's not that different is Slot's attitude is, you're just thinking about last season, you're just thinking about 23-24. There was 3 different types of Jurgen Klopp football before you even got to 23-24, which was a bit of a throwback to 2017-18 when he committed all into what he does. But he showed when he went back to Brighton for the 2-2 draw last season. And we beat them, by the way, in the return game at Anfield. He showed that, for instance, he could go and look at them, look at what they do, reverse it, use some of that power that they had in terms of bait the press, use it back on them a little bit. Don't get drawn in, don't get sucked in, but when you go, pick your moments. And we were 2-1 up, and if Gravenberch makes it 3-1 in that game, I think we go on and win the game 4 or 5. It was a Brighton side that was a bit devoid of confidence at that point. So he's shown he can do it. I just think that the idea of showing he can do it for 4 more years to see it all through is the bit where he was like, oh, God, can't be bothered with that. And that began to creep in. And the language that he used around when he was going to stand down, he says he was in a meeting discussing the following season's pre-season, and he sort of just completely disengaged. And I've been lucky enough to interview him on 6 occasions, I think, and I've met him on 2 other occasions. But everyone's seen the videos of things like when he goes around Alder Hey and sees the children. And everyone loves the videos. But one of the reasons why he's so amazing in those videos is because he's so present in the moment in terms of what he's doing. So at the moment he's speaking to either a sick child or speaking to their parents, he talks to them like they're the only thing in the world. And when I've been lucky enough to be in the room with him, he spends that time when he's talking to you as though there's nothing else he could be doing. He's doing this and he's all in. You never get the impression he's thinking, oh, I need to get this interview out the way and then go and do something else. He's really present. He's the most present person I've ever met. And I think those videos do a really good job of capturing that when he's with people from outside of football. They do a really good job of capturing how much someone, whatever it is, the thing is that's in front of him is the most important thing he could possibly be doing at that moment. And then he'll go and do the next thing, and that'll become the most important thing. My point is, he's the most present person I've ever met. So the idea that he was sat in a meeting about something that's really important to his work, and he felt he was no longer present, I think will have been massive for him. For us, I'm sure in our jobs from time to time, you could probably list 5 times that's happened to you this week. I know I can, where you're just sort of bumbling along. But for him and the way he is, I think that was the point. And when having met him, I felt like, yeah, and seen all the videos. I went, I can see that. I can see why you suddenly went, I'm not sure. I don't know if I can do this, because if I can't be that person who's here on top of everything, aware of everything, I can't be the person who can coach the football team properly. So I think that's the big part of it. I think he could have, I think if you'd have said his life depends on it, you've got to go and pull another great side together and do it all. I think he could have done it. I just think he thinks, let someone else have a turn. And I think he also thinks I'm giving it over at a really good moment.
I think he's a man of like real character integrity.
Yeah.
That is why when he realized that he can't do it or his heart is not 100% in it, he knew probably that he would not be doing justice to everyone that cares.
Yeah, entirely that.
Yeah.
And Neil, I mean, you talked about handing it over in the right moment. Of course, it's always good to leave when people say why instead of when people say why not.
Yep.
So, that is amazing. So, what do you think in your book? I mean, have you touched upon it, because we've talking about it? So, about Arne Slot, and how do you think he has approached this? Because we are now into 2 months of Arne Slot as our manager.
Nidhi, I think he's been brilliant. Not just the on the pitch stuff, but the off the pitch stuff. And the reason why I think he's been brilliant is he's not tried to be Jurgen. He's just been himself.
Exactly.
And he's allowed where himself is almost a little bit the opposite of Jurgen, or at least perceived to be right now. He's just gone, yeah, you're all going to have to just get on board with that. I'm going to be me, and this is the way in which it's going to be. And I'll say the thing that again matters. I keep coming back to it, but winning helps. So now we're in a situation where we sit here and he's won 6 out of 7 games. The one he's lost is hugely annoying, but he's won 6 out of 7 games. But I think he's winning helps. He's done a really good job of it, and long may that continue. What I would say, and what he would say, is, well, he hasn't played that good a side yet. I think Milan are a good side on the whole. They'll take a bit of beating. I don't think United are very good at all. So I don't think it really particularly counts yet. It's a big game. It's a big crowd, but it's not a really good side. But also what he hasn't had is the emotional games. And I think he doesn't want the early games to be too emotional. I think he just wants to get through, do the job. When you get into the second part of the season, that's where the emotion comes to the fore. The winning, every game matters that bit more. You're closer to silverware, hopefully. And that's where I think we'll see a little bit more of who he is. And then to your point before about the connection, I don't think you can force that connection, but the best way to build that connection is through a winning football team. That's step one. I'll say it again. You fell in love with Klopp because you fell in love with the way Sadio Mane ran at him when he made it 4-1 against Arsenal on his debut. And you fell in love with Klopp there because Sadio Mane loved him, and you immediately loved Sadio Mane, and it was absolutely amazing. And you just thought, oh my God, the football this fella can play. And there's loads of other reasons and brilliant things about Jurgen Klopp. He's an incredible man. But the football, you've got to win, and you've got to, in a Liverpool sense, win. I think win well and win over an extended period of time. And Slot's doing the right thing at the minute, and I'm really pleased with how he's come in, pleased with the way he's gone about it. There's loads still to do, but I think we can have a great year with him.
It started really well. 6 wins out of 7. We've scored 18 goals. I think we've conceded just the 3 so far. Neil, it's been a pleasure. Your book, Transformer Klopp, The Revolution of a Club and Culture. Can you just tell us how and where we can get it from here in India?
I think just from wherever you can get your books, and also if you want it as an audio book, which is me reading it, and it was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. I'm a good talker and a terrible reader. It transpires. And there's nothing worse than reading your own book and seeing a typo coming up at the end of the paragraph. Oh no. Anyway, it's on Audible and places like that now. If people want to get hold of it and listen to it in the audio form as well. I hope people do. I hope they enjoy it if they do. And I hope that as many of your listeners as possible can firstly continue to love Liverpool, but also in an ideal world like you two being able to get over to Anfield at least once in a while and come and see us.
Absolutely. Just for the Indian audience, the book available here, Amazon.com. You can go and get your copy. It's at a very reasonable price. It's written by Neil. It's not the first book which has been written by Neil. And of course, Neil is part of the Anfield Wrap. If you're a Liverpool supporter and if you've not subscribed to the Anfield Wrap, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Please go subscribe to the Anfield Wrap. And this was an amazing time, Neil. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed the show.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Did you want to end this?
Absolutely. So, guys, get your copies. It is available on Amazon, on Flipkart, wherever you get your books. And as Neil said, it's available as an audiobook as well. I would urge you, please have a look at the book. It's really, really amazing, and it will give you an insight into a lot of what goes on at a football club rather than just the football games. But thank you, Neil. It's been amazing. The Anfield Wrap, the handle is mentioned in the title, so please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Not that these guys need us to ask everyone to subscribe to them, but please go ahead, and if you haven't, please go subscribe, and please make sure like and subscribe to our channel as well. And we will see you once again. Bye bye and take care.
See you guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.